On the 1st of January 2026, Rolex is raising prices again. Rolex prefers to work behind the scenes and doesn't talk about price increases, but catalogs have leaked and industry insiders are scrambling, collectors rushing to authorized dealers before the clock strikes midnight on New Year's Eve. The average increase? 7%. Some models? Try 9%, 10%, more. And we're about to walk through exactly which watches are getting hit, why the increases keep coming, and what happened in 2025 that turned Rolex pricing into a circus. By the end of watching this, you'll understand why 2026 might be the most expensive year to buy a Rolex in modern history and whether it's even worth trying anymore. The January 1st price hike. What's actually changing? Yes, there's news of a Rolex price increase effective January 1st, 2026. Rolex doesn't make public announcements in advance. They never do. The brand operates with almost absurd levels of secrecy. But a leaked 2026 US master price catalog, first reported by Watch Pro and corroborated across industry sites like Gear Patrol, Luxury Tribune, and Watch Forums, shows an average increase of around 7%. So do you want to know what you're paying for that Submariner you've been on a wait list for since 2023? You might think this is Rolex showing how powerful they are, but the reality is that this isn't just Rolex being Rolex. This is the third US price adjustment in just over a year. In January 2025, prices went up around 5% globally. In May 2025, another bump, 3 to 4%, but this was US specific. Now, January 2026, another 7%. So, if you were eyeing a steel Submariner at the end of 2023, you're now looking at cumulative increases pushing 15% in just over 12 months. That's 15% on a watch that was already out of reach for most people. The price increase varies on the model of watches. Steel models get modest increases. According to the breakdown by material, based on the leaked data, stainless steel models see increases around 5 to 6%, so models like Submariner, GMT Master 2, and Datejust will have a maximum of 6% increase in prices. These are Rolex's core sports and professional watches. This relatively modest increase is maybe to protect accessibility for the brand's bread and butter references. The no-date Submariner, currently listed at $9,500, will reportedly become a 5-figure watch on January 1st, with its price rising to $10,050. $10,000 for the entry-level steel sports watch. The GMT Master 2 Batman will see a $700 increase from $11,100 to $11,800. Real question though, when did we start calling 5 to 6% modest for a watch that's supposed to hold value? You'll notice it when you finally get the call from your authorized dealer. Imagine you've been waiting a few years, and when the watch arrives, the price is above what you planned for it. You'd have to add $850 more, which wasn't the situation when you put your name down. And you pay it anyway. Because what's the alternative? Get back in line? The two-tone models would typically see 7 to 9% increases. These combine stainless steel with precious metals like yellow gold, white gold, Everose gold. So your two-tone Submariner, two-tone Datejust, and two-tone GMT Master 2 are going to get price increases you didn't plan for. The increases hit harder here because you're already in that luxury, but not quite full gold territory. You're paying for precious metal content, but not at day-date levels. Still, you're paying 7 to 9% more. Week 1, you think it's fine. The watch looks incredible. Week 3, you realize you just paid $3,000 extra compared to last year for essentially the same watch. Week 6, you're on forums watching people argue about whether Rolex even holds its value in the secondary market. Then you check Chrono 24 and see your exact reference selling for less than you paid retail after the hike. Still, that won't stop Rolex from increasing prices. And they even went crazy on the gold models. Full gold and precious metal models like the Day-Date, Gold Daytona, and Gold Submariner face the steepest jumps. Their hike is around 8 to 10% or higher in some cases. The yellow gold Cosmograph Daytona breaks the $50,000 barrier, moving into the low $50,000 range from a previous price point near $48,000. The Day-Date 40 in yellow gold, Rolex's flagship, the President, sees similar treatment. At this point, the Day-Date is firmly positioned as a high luxury product rather than just a watch. This increase is driven heavily by record gold prices, which recently surpassed $4,300 per ounce and continue climbing. We'll get into that. But first, you need to understand what these increases look like in aggregate. The leaked pricing table tells a brutal story. Entry steel references like the Air King and Datejust face hikes of just over 5% for January 2026. Even the Steel Submariner and GMT Master 2 fall into a similar range. Where does the jump become noticeable? Precious metals. Gold references across the board see increases landing between 8.5 and 9%. Models like the Day-Date in yellow gold and the white gold Daytona stand out not just for their absolute price jump, but for how much faster they've climbed compared to their steel counterparts. Analysis of the Rolex Master Catalog shows prices for steel watches rising by around 5.6%, while gold references will be up by almost 9%. Rolex will have increased US prices 3 times in a year by January 1st. 3 times. In 1 year. Given the several price pressures impacting Swiss watchmakers over the past year, Rolex's average price rise of 7% in January might be considered conservative. The average price of steel watches tracked by WatchPro has risen by 10.6% since the end of 2024, while the average gold watch price is up by almost 20%. 20% in 1 year. You'll realize it when you pull up that screenshot you took of the Daytona listing in December 2024. You were going to save up. You had a plan. You check the current price, it's $9,600 more than it was 12 months ago. Your plan is dead. And to understand why these increases keep accelerating. To understand why 7% feels inevitable instead of outrageous, we need to talk about what's actually driving costs up across the entire Swiss watch industry. Why this is happening. There are around 4 reasons why this price hike is happening, and we'll tell you all about them, starting with number 1. Number 1. Gold prices. The 70% problem. Surging gold and raw material costs serve as the primary driver for precious metal models. Gold prices exploded throughout 2025, rising over 60 to 70% year to date and repeatedly hitting all-time highs above $4,300 to $4,500 per ounce, with some peaks near $4,510. Spot gold broke through the $4,500 per ounce barrier on December 23, 2025, with intraday highs around $4,525 to $4,526. That leaves gold more than 70% higher year to date, its strongest annual gain since the late 1970s. So, we get why Rolex has to raise prices on gold models. The situation is straightforward. They use significant amounts of 18-karat gold in precious metal references. When your raw material costs explode 70%, you can't absorb that. Then you look at the timing. This directly impacts Rolex's full gold and two-tone models, which see the steepest hikes of 8 to 10% or more. Rolex uses substantial amounts of 18-karat gold in these models, and with no signs of gold cooling off soon. Actually, analysts forecast further rise in gold prices into 2026 due to geopolitical tensions, central bank buying, and inflation hedging. Passing on these costs is inevitable, and Rolex is going to pass on more. And no, this isn't us being negative. Goldman Sachs predicts $4,900 per ounce as a base case scenario for 2026. The scenario over the course of 2026 would play out like this. You are still on the wait list, and before you eventually pick up your watch, that January price you have adjusted to wouldn't be the price you'd get it. It would have increased. You didn't change. The watch didn't change. The metal underneath just became more expensive to dig out of the ground. But it is not just about the gold. Number 2. U.S. tariffs. The 15% chaos. Ongoing U.S. tariffs on Swiss imports create the second major pressure point. The U.S. is Rolex's largest market, and now it has a stabilized 15% tariff on Swiss watches. This is a reduction from a chaotic peak of 39% in mid-2025 after negotiations. However, this is still a massive jump from pre-2025 levels. Before 2025, it was around 2 to 3%. Now the situation has changed, and while Rolex has absorbed some of the new import cost partially, they ultimately pass it to the buyer via pricing. The leaked U.S. catalog explicitly ties much of the 7% average hike to this tariff, especially since 2025 already saw multiple U.S.-specific adjustments. It creates pressure to harmonize global pricing upward. Real question though, how did we get from 2% to 39% to 15% in the span of 8 months? That story is wild, and we're going to get there. But first, understand what 15% means in practice. If Rolex imports a watch valued at $8,000 wholesale, they're paying $1,200 in tariffs. That cost gets passed to the authorized dealer. The dealer marks it up. You pay retail. That $1,200 turns into $2,000 or more at the boutique. That increase is for absolutely nothing. You're not getting a better watch. You're not getting better service. You're paying for trade policy. And while things have stabilized, the United States government in recent times has shown that they can be unpredictable. Maybe they'll slap new tariffs on Swiss products. But even if they don't, this next reason will keep prices high. Number 3. Currency fluctuations and dollar weakness. Currency fluctuations and general inflation form the third pillar. A weaker US dollar against the Swiss franc has made exports more expensive for American buyers. Combined with broader inflation in production, labor, and supply chain costs, this contributes to the baseline increase across all models, even steel ones. The continued weakness of the US dollar compared to the Swiss franc and other currencies is attributed to the United States administration's tariffs and economic policies, resulting in global speculation about America's economy. Broad dollar indices are heading for one of their worst years since the early 2000s, with the US currency down roughly 9 to 10% against major peers in 2025. So when your steel date just goes up $550 even though it doesn't contain any gold, just remember this reason here. However, the rise in gold, increased tariff, and weakening dollar aren't the only reasons Rolex is hiking prices. You see, Rolex has an endgame. This brings us to reason number 4. Number 4. Rolex's strategic positioning. The quiet part. Rolex's strategic positioning represents the factor nobody wants to say out loud. Rolex isn't just reacting to costs. Annual January hikes have become standard to reinforce scarcity, desirability, and investment value. Widening the price gap between steel, the more accessible models, and gold, the ultra-luxury models, helps manage demand and protect brand equity in a market where waitlists remain long despite economic headwinds. This means that Rolex has pricing power, and they're using it. Demand for Rolex remains incredibly strong, even greater than supply, so they have the pricing power to implement these increases without major backlash. Think about what that means. Rolex could hold prices flat. They could absorb some of these costs. They have 10.58 billion Swiss francs in revenue for 2024, or $11.23 billion. They captured 32.1% of market share in 2024. They don't need to raise prices to survive. They're raising prices because they can. Because waitlists are still years long. Because secondary market prices haven't collapsed. Because every time they raise prices, people complain and then they pay anyway. The truth nobody wants to hear is when a brand has absolute pricing power and zero accountability, prices go in one direction: up. And the wildest part? There are still a lot of up for the prices to go. But how did we get to this point of ruthless price increases in the first place? How we got here. The insane tariff roller coaster of 2025. This new increase follows two increases in 2025. The first increase in 2025 was in January, and it was approximately 5% globally. Then another one came in May and was approximately an increase of 3 to 4. Let's break down what actually happened. In January 2025, global increase averaged around 4 to 5%. This was Rolex's standard annual adjustment, but with notably uneven impacts. Stainless steel models had modest rises of 1 to 3%. The steel Submariner went up approximately from $100 to $200. Two-tone models went up around 5 to 7%. Full gold, precious metal models. Steepest jumps, often 8 to 14%, some gold Daytonas up as much as $7,500 or 19% in certain configurations. So what were the primary causes back then? More or less the same reasons for this 2026 increase. There is the surging gold prices. Gold rose approximately 27 to 30% in 2024. This means it rose from around $2,000 to $2,076 per ounce. Also, there was general inflation and production costs, currency fluctuations, strategic positioning. The January 2025 hike shocked many due to the scale on gold models, widening the premium significantly. But at least it made sense. Gold prices went up. Gold watches got more expensive. Simple. Then things got weird because the United States government made it so. The result was what happened in May 2025. On April 2nd, the United States government announced sweeping new tariffs on goods imported into the United States. In addition to a 10% baseline tariff on imported goods, higher reciprocal tariffs were set to begin April 9th for countries with large trade surpluses with the United States. Switzerland, with its massive luxury watch exports, very much qualifies. Starting with a 10% tariff effective around April 2025, escalating trade tensions prompted Rolex to pass on approximately 3% to US. This was an uncommon mid-year adjustment that targeted the US market only. This wasn't the global price increase of January 2025. Real question though. If a 10% tariff only caused a 3% price increase, what happens when tariffs get way higher? On the 7th of August 2025, a 39% tariff on Swiss goods took effect after the US government announced it on the 2nd of August 2025. This was nearly 2.5 times the rate applied to goods from nearby EU countries. Analysts estimated that Swiss luxury watches could rise an additional 12 to 22% if brands fully passed tariff costs along to consumers. Bernstein analyst Luca Solca wrote to clients that the last-minute deal that many had hoped for didn't materialize. Solca said Swiss watchmakers will likely need to hike prices as a result of the levies. The analyst said the 39% levy is almost 2 times higher than previously expected for the country. You wake up on August 2025. You're on a wait list. You've been waiting 18 months. Suddenly, analysts are saying your watch might cost 12 to 14% more when it arrives. That steel Submariner you thought would be $9,700, now it might be $11,000. There was panic in the Rolex community. Forums melted down. Authorized dealers were flooded with calls. Secondary market sellers started jacking up prices, anticipating retail chaos. And then something very strange happened. Just weeks after this tariff went into effect, Rolex invited the United States president to attend the US Open Tennis Championships, an event Rolex sponsors, at the company's center court box. The president appeared in the US Open on September 7th, 2025, alongside Rolex CEO Jean-Frédéric Dufour, weeks after tariffing the watchmaker's home country of Switzerland. Trump watched the men's singles final in New York in a mid-court box operated by Rolex. The president was joined by family members and high-profile White House officials, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt. Rolex's invitation came within weeks of placing a 39% tariff rate on Switzerland, which was higher than other countries in the region face, following deals between the US and the European Union and United Kingdom. The timing was, let's say, interesting. United States officials questioned Rolex CEO Jean-Frédéric Dufour about the company's intentions in a letter dated September 24th. Dufour denied any improper conduct or tariff-related discussions, stating that trade negotiations are handled strictly between the US and Swiss governments. The president himself jokingly asked Dufour whether he would have been invited had it not been for the tariffs, referring to the 39% rate. The remark was met with laughter and quickly brushed aside, according to Dufour's response letter. No substantive discussion of trade policy or tariffs occurred during the event, per official accounts. Then, on the 4th of November 2025, the White House hosted a delegation of Swiss business leaders for a private meeting with the president. The delegation included Jean-Frédéric Dufour, Rolex CEO, Johann Rupert, the chair of luxury goods firm Richemont, Alfred Gantner, the co-founder of private equity firm Partners Group, Marwan Shakarchi, head of precious metals group MKS SA. Rolex presented the president with a gold-tone Rolex desk clock during the visit. Marwan Shakarchi presented him with a 1-kilogram personalized gold bar stamped with 45 and 47 in homage to his presidential terms. That bar is worth a little more than $130,000. The president accepted the gifts on behalf of his presidential library, making them legal, White House officials say. Rolex had discussed gifting a rare titanium watch, but decided the gold clock was more to the president's liking, according to a person briefed about the meeting. The gifts and the gab pleased the president, who posted shortly afterward on Truth Social. "I'd like to commend all of the people present on a job well done." Swiss lawmakers are investigating the gifts and what Rolex planned with it. Then, on November 14th, 2025, the US and Switzerland announced a deal to dramatically reduce the tariff from 39% to a maximum of 15%. Under the deal, Switzerland agreed to reduce import duties on a range of US products. Swiss companies also intend to make direct investments in the US, totaling $200 billion by the end of 2028. The 39% rate lasted approximately 99 days before being negotiated down to 15%. Top leaders in the United States government were not buying the official story. She was suspecting foul play, but there was nothing anyone could prove happened. Do you think there really was something shady that happened in the background? Or are the doubting United States government officials being too suspicious? When luxury watch tariffs drop from 39% to 15% right after a CEO gifts a gold clock and sits in a suite with the president, calling it intensive discussions is doing a lot of work. It can appear suspicious too. Rolex didn't apply another price increase when the United States administration raised that tariff to 39% in August, choosing instead to wait out the tariffs and, by some appearances, negotiate directly with the United States administration in an attempt to bring them down. Those unofficial negotiations appear to have worked, perhaps due in part to Rolex inviting the United States president to their suite in the US Open and then give him a special gold clock during a White House visit. Could these acts have really helped lower the tariff to 15% in November? Rolex gambled. They waited. They hosted. They gifted. And it worked. The tariff dropped from 39% to 15%. Rolex avoided the 12 to 14% retail price increase that would have been necessary under the higher rate. So why does this matter for January 2026? Still, the 15% tariff remains, and still, it is too high. Especially when you now know that the tariffs on Swiss goods to the US were traditionally around 2 to 3% prior to 2025. That 15% is still in effect for 2026, which is why we're seeing another 7% average increase January 1st. Overall, 2025 was a turbulent year for pricing due to the combo of record gold rallies and tariff volatility, making it one of the more disruptive in recent history. You'll realize it when you look back at the price you paid. You bought in November 2025, thinking you beat the January hike. You check secondary market prices 6 months later. Your watch hasn't appreciated. It's holding flat, maybe down slightly. Because the increases weren't about scarcity. They were about tariffs, gold prices, and corporate pricing power. And that brings us to the final question. What does all of this actually mean if you're trying to buy a Rolex in 2026, and is it even worth it anymore? Let's be brutally honest about what's happening. In 2024, a steel Submariner cost around $9,300. By January 2026, that same watch will cost $10,050. That's $750, an 8% increase in just over 12 months. But you already knew this. We've told you early in the video. For gold models, the yellow gold Daytona was around $42,000 in early 2024. By January 2026, it'll break $50,000. That's $8,000 more. 19%. In less than 2 years, many collectors are rushing purchases before year-end to lock in current pricing, especially on gold references. The time to buy is now, if you can. But that's the problem, isn't it? These watches are all difficult to purchase at retail anyway, with their notoriously years-long waitlists. These price increases mean that the secondary market prices will go up too. Retail price increases almost always ripple into the secondary market, though the effect isn't immediate. Over time, repeated retail increases reset price expectations across the board. For collectors and prospective buyers, the January 2026 deadline creates a clear decision point. Those with access to desired references at current pricing face an obvious incentive to purchase before year-end. The rest continue navigating waitlists and secondary market opportunities as the luxury watch landscape continues its evolution. So, if you have an AD relationship and they're offering you a watch right now, buy it. If you're on a waitlist, you're paying the higher price. No exceptions. If you're buying secondary, prices will adjust upwards slowly as the new retail baseline gets established. Stainless steel models remain notoriously difficult to purchase at retail, with authorized dealers maintaining extensive waitlists for popular references like the Submariner, GMT Master II, and Daytona. The retail price increase on steel models matters less when most buyers never access retail availability. Secondary market pricing operates largely independent of Rolex retail adjustments, driven instead by supply constraints and collector demand. You'll notice it when you're on Chrono 24 looking at a Batman GMT. Retail just went up $700. The secondary market price? Still roughly the same as last month. Because secondary isn't driven by retail pricing. It's driven by availability and demand. If nobody can get the watch at retail anyway, raising the retail price doesn't matter much. With prices increasing for new Rolex models, expect a similar increase on the brand's certified pre-owned watches. Gold models see steeper and more consistent increases year after year. For stainless steel models, even though the percentage increase is smaller, availability remains the bigger challenge. In the secondary market, gold models often see a slower, more measured response to retail price hikes, as higher entry prices naturally narrow the buyer pool. The watches that hold value, the ones people actually want, that you can't get at retail. The watches that don't, everything else. This isn't one single shock like the 2025 tariff roller coaster. It's a cumulative effect, with gold prices and tariffs as the biggest culprits. Demand for Rolex remains incredibly strong, outstripping supply, so they have the pricing power to implement these without major backlash. If gold stabilizes or tariffs ease further, future hikes might moderate, but for 2026, this seems locked in. Rolex is no longer a watch company that happens to be expensive. It's a luxury goods company that happens to make watches. The pricing reflects that reality. So, first question, are you buying before January 1st? Or are you waiting to see if prices stabilize? Hit like on this video, subscribe and drop a comment. Let us know which model you're eyeing and whether these increases change your plans. Second question, What should we cover next? Do you want a breakdown of other Swiss brands raising prices? A guide to secondary market buying? An analysis of which Rolex models actually hold value versus which ones are overhyped? We'll make whatever helps you most. Remember, gold hit $4,500 per ounce in December 2025. Tariffs remain at 15%. The dollar is weak. Rolex has absolute pricing power and years-long waitlists. January 1st, 2026 is coming whether we're ready or not. And when it arrives, Rolex will be more expensive than it's ever been. If you've been on a waitlist at your local AD for a while now, it might be worth reaching out before the end of the year and seeing if you can make your purchase within the next few days. Because the clock is ticking, and unlike Rolex watches, time isn't appreciating in value. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.